Okay, so the time is 5:37 in the AM on Thursday, December 30th, 2021. It is currently dumping snow outside, which is cuckoo banana. I live in the Pacific Northwest. Stop that. And I have checked on my Animal Crossing villagers. Did so while I was going for my run. I've showered. My hair is still wet, so it is what it is. And I am here filming day 211, the last deep dive of 2021, you know, on the day that it needs to go out. I mean, usually I give myself a day in advance, so this will be fun. I hope I have enough time to get through all of the things and edit the video and get it up. And honestly, I debated just doing this as a live, but who's awake this early? So there's that. I am going to get to the video and tell you what deep dive we're doing and all the jazz in just a minute. Actually, just a couple minutes, because I have a couple things that I want to show you guys in the end of 'Tis the Damn Season. And one of them is a beautiful Christmas card from one of my sudsers from 6th Ave. And she is a dear, dear friend. And I love her and her 3 kiddos oh so very much. It's unreal. My cup runneth over for them. And they sent me a gift card to Cutter's Point, which is amazing because my favorite coffee house. So thank you so much. And I'm not going to read the note because I'm going to cry. And I still might cry when I show you the cool pictures that her kiddos drew. But I love them so much. I'm just gonna, we're keeping the names out. This one's from my boy. He's my boy. Me and him were good buddies. And we got a beautiful card from my girl. Again, I'm going to just keep the names hidden. There's me and there's Mrs. Soap and Clay and my girl decorating a Christmas tree together. I don't know if I held that up right. I'm sorry if I didn't. And yeah, the youngest, who is a king. He is a king among men. He didn't draw me something because, he's little. But thank you so much for that. That was huge. I loved that. Thank you. And again, I'm going to close the card because I'm just going to freaking cry. And we're not crying. And I also have another cool thing that I want to show that I got from one of the mods on the channel. Got from Kaylee. She sent me something, and I'm thinking it's probably soap, but we're going to check it out. Camera can't even show this cool unboxing, but it's a box, okay? Just so you know. Okay. Very cute. Comes with a cute sticker that says good times. I like that. And is it soap? Is it soap? Is it soap? It's soap. It's soap, you guys. Okay, so we have a Winter Wonderland from Fizzly Bath Treats in Pennsylvania. So if you guys are in the Pennsylvania area and you want to check out some new soaps, do that. Winter Wonderland soap. The Christmas wreath, fresh cut pine, balsam, hollyberry, and earthly pine cones. Also, very cute. Oh, I love the mica swirl on the top. I'm going to unwrap these and we'll do like a, peppermint. Oh my goodness. So there's the peppermint soap. And what else? Vanilla lavender. Oh, I really want to open this one up and smell it. I'm going to. Now, we will properly open up the rest of them and do like a lather test for sure. I actually have a couple other sudsers that have sent me soap in the last little bit, so we can do another lather test video and give some shout outs on the channel for all of these awesome soap makers. I'm sorry if that was just all up in the, I'm sorry. Oh, that's good. Oh, beautiful mica line on the top of that. And then such a lovely bar there. That is wonderful. Thank you, Kaylee, for sending me soaps. This is amazing. I cannot wait to do a lather test on all of these guys and a couple other ones that have been sent in the last little bit. So we will definitely have another one of those videos upcoming, some lather tests on other soap makers. I love that. If anybody ever wants to do lather tests and all that jazz, send me some soaps. I never say no to soaps, for sure. And, oh, I have a card in here too. I don't want to. I don't want to. Oh, God. That was amazing. Okay. That was amazing, and I'm not going to read it to you guys. I don't have Kaylee's permission to do so, and I can't. I'm going to compose myself, and we're going to get on with the damn thing in just a minute. But before I do, hello, I am Mrs. Soap and Clay. Let's make stuff. How's it going, Sudsers? Welcome back to the channel. You are at Soap and Clay, where we make all the soapy things, and you are here for day 211 of 365 days of soap, and a big shout out to, you know, the peoples that are sending me the things that are making me cry. I mean, I haven't done that guy on the channel in a while, so thanks. And today we are doing a deep dive. Now, if you are unfamiliar with our deep dives, here's how it goes. I pick one ingredient or thing that we use in soap making, and I talk about it a lot. We talk about the history, we talk about the origin, we talk about the production, we talk about its uses in soap, its fatty acid profiles, going down to the chemical composition, and then we also talk about any sort of controversies that may, you know, surround said item. And we've done olive oil, coconut oil, palm oil, shea butter. I think maybe that's it. I'm not real sure at this point. And today we are doing cocoa butter. So that's going to be a fun one for sure, because cocoa butter is actually a really fun and interesting one to research, because the majority of the information you get on the interwebs about cocoa butter, as you might expect, comes from places that are talking about food. Comes from food sites and food.orgs and the .orgs. And so that's what we are going to do today. We are going to talk all about cocoa butter and obviously the cocoa tree. And in some places I'm going to say cacao tree, but probably only mostly during the origin bits. And I will just refer back to cocoa tree and cocoa butter, because that's how I pronounce and how I know it to be. And it just gets really confusing in my mouth when I try to say something different. You get it? So let's get to the video, and we will talk all about cocoa butter and start out with where we always start out. Why is cocoa butter? That why is thing just reminded me that a couple days ago, I actually had someone like correct my grammar on a title that was obviously grammatically incorrect, but it was obviously grammatically incorrect. And I'm like, you're new here. Welcome. You're going to get used to it, or you're going to hate it. I don't know. But why is cocoa butter? Okay. Now, the cacao tree, which is, I think, technically called Theobroma cacao tree, actually originated from what we can tell in the Americas, in South America and Latin America, and still grows and flourishes there to this day. And that's awesome, but also weird, because currently 70% of all cocoa production comes from West Africa. And it wasn't until 1800s, like the early 1800s, that a cacao tree was taken, a plant, a seed was taken to West Africa and planted. And then cultivation and crops and everything flourished from there. And by flourished, that's not really even necessarily the case. The cacao tree is actually a very interesting little plant in and of itself. It likes a lot of shade. It only grows to be about between like 15 and 20 feet tall, so not a huge tree. And a lot of things can kill it. And the things that can kill it spread really rapidly throughout the crop and throughout the area that it's planted in from tree to tree. And for that reason, the majority of the current growth of when you're doing production level, it's kept to like less than 5-acre plots at a time. Now, granted, you can have multiple 5-acre plots on a farm, but they're kind of spaced out with some buffer room between them, so a disease doesn't spread to the entirety of the crop. Very interesting stuff. And the cacao tree really flourishes and does well, and in fact requires a very tropical, humid climate. I mean, they have to get at least 4 inches of rainfall every single month, which is not that big of a deal because, like, just come to the Pacific Northwest, but they also need it to be hot and muggy in order to survive. So don't come to the Pacific Northwest because it'd be cold up here. One of the things I found most interesting about the cocoa tree, we're going to cocoa now, okay, is its actual harvesting process, right? And even what it looks like. And for someone who is a huge chocolate lover, like that is a part of my daily life, it's a staple in my life, I never gave much thought to where chocolate really comes from and found that to be interesting and weird. But so with all of this, I looked it up and looked up a picture, and I'll put one up here somewhere. But they're really weird looking. And so it's like, you know, it's like a shea or like a coconut or like many other things, really, in that you have this thing and then you break it open and there's other stuff inside. So it's technically a fruit, the thing that comes off. And inside this fruit are all these little pods, the seeds. But you can also eat the flesh around the seeds that produce the cocoa powder and the cocoa butter. Right? Those things are processed to do that. You can eat the flesh around it. And I found this really cool article that I will link. It's not even an article, it's just a WordPress blog, but I will link down below from floridafruitgeek.com. It's really wild. Like it talks about what it's like to actually eat the flesh around the cocoa beans. And it's really cool. So if you have some time and you want to peruse through and learn about what it's like to eat it, you should do it. But I'm also going to put a picture of the actual whole cocoa fruit up above, and you can see like what it looks like. It's very strange. It's wild. And underneath that flesh, those are our cocoa beans. Another interesting part about the harvesting is not just the way it looks. It's that everything is harvested mostly by hand these days, and like these kind of scythe type apparatus to get all the fruits off of the tree. And then they are like hand broken and they take the pods out like by hand. There are other methods to do this, but for the most part, from what I can tell with my research, most farmers still do it this way. So it's very labor intensive. We're going to get to labor intensive when we start talking about controversies with cocoa butter. Now, when you get the cocoa beans out of the actual fruit itself, that process is not done. Oh, nay, nay. You need to ferment it. You need to dry it. You need to cook it. And then you need to deshell it. It's a big process. It's kind of like it was shea that also had a really, really labor-intensive process, right? Pretty sure. Now, you know, once the pods are removed from the actual cocoa fruit, they can then be washed and then dried and do the little fermenting thing, and they can then be shipped all over the world for the rest of the processing to happen. And that processing involves, much like with shea, essentially breaking it apart, making a paste, and then you have your solid ingredients versus your liquid ingredients. One becomes a chocolate liqueur, you know, and that also can become cocoa powder. And then the solid waste isn't really waste, it's the cocoa butter. And we're not going to get too far into it because it's really not the purpose of looking at cocoa butter from a soaper's perspective, but just like checking out, and I'll leave some links as to, you know, that I found on the different chocolate sites or whatever, the process of making like a dark chocolate versus a semi-sweet and a bitter and a white and everything has a lot to do with the percentage of like the chocolate liquor versus the percentage of cocoa powder. And realistically, cocoa butter creates like the most amazing, easy white chocolate ever, which is wild. And that's really cool. So if you ever actually wanted to know how these different chocolates get made, I'll again put some links down below and you guys can go check them out. I found that to be very fascinating and went down a very weird rabbit hole and then realized that I was just hungry and I got a snack and I was able to focus and continue on with proper research for cocoa butter. So again, cocoa butter, after the beans have been fermented and dried and roasted and ground and separated, the solids, stuff left behind, cocoa butter. And it takes like an entire tree's worth of production to get 1 pound of chocolate. I had a hard time determining what that even meant, right? Because are they literally just talking about chocolate powder, which is going to be very lightweight, right? But even so, what size are those things of chocolate that you buy of the cocoa powder to make things? They're like 12 ounces, right? Just the standard size. And so if that's what they're measuring, it's one whole tree went into making that one thing. Wild. If they're talking about total production, cocoa butter and the powder, and that's nothing. That's wow. And I had a difficult time actually finding that because, again, most of the information about cocoa butter is going to really go to cocoa powder and food. And they don't care a whole hell of a lot about, cocoa butter and uses in soap. Although, interestingly, I found this interview, really is what it was, that was translated into English and put up on the interwebs from this African farmer that was talking about the production and, working and living and owning because she owns, cocoa farms. And she mentioned in this interview that the bad pods, the bad beans, are highly sought after by soap makers. And she had an actual word for it. And I went to go search that word to see if it came up with soap. And I struck out. But if I find this, I will link it below too. Found that to be really interesting. Essentially the rotten, they're not really rotten. It's kind of like in Willy Wonka with the bad egg, like that. They all have to be perfectly whatever to be sent off. You get it. That's kind of what I gathered from this interview. So they're just doesn't meet the perfect purity standards for making chocolate with. And so therefore they're bad. And the soap makers in the area want those. That's what they make their soap with. So that was an interesting little factoid. And again, trying to search into all of that, deeper into all of that, see if that's where our cocoa butter that we use for our soaping purposes actually comes from. I came up with a big goose egg. So I'm going to assume that's not where it comes from. Otherwise, we would know that. There would be some sort of trail. Maybe. Anyway, we're getting way too far ahead at this point, and I blame it on very early in the morning, scatterbrained, because way too much coffee. So back to the actual crop itself, the history and the yield. History, super old, as 70% of all cocoa is currently coming out of Africa, even though it was native to the Americas. And it takes a lot of cocoa fruits to make 1 pound of chocolate, whatever that definition of chocolate may be. The trees themselves only live to be about 100 years old, but they only have good production for about 40 years, and it takes them about 5 years from planting to actually start making, cocoa fruits. So there's kind of a short lifespan there as to how long they can actually produce. And even though they are an evergreen, they do produce once a year as far as the fruit goes, which, makes sense because evergreens are also the same. And back when I was talking about the actual size of all the farms, again, 90% of our cocoa that is put into, the world for economic purchasing is comes from small farms. And small farms mean something less than 5 acres or less. And the reason why they do that, why they keep all of the plots very, very small, is because they don't want to, kill the trees with a breakout of an infection. And the most common infection of these trees is a pod rot, which is a fungus that spreads very, very easily from tree to tree and can destroy your entire crop. And so that's therefore destroying your entire livelihood. And that is no good. So yeah, we are revisiting the Ivory Coast of Africa for this because for all intents and purposes, this is where the production is, and therefore we need to focus on that for really the rest of it. So there are controversies with this one, and they're not good ones. And I don't know why I continue to get myself into these messes. But before we leave this section and go on to, its uses in soap, its fatty acid profiles, and the controversies surrounding it, I did want to go ahead and go with some mythology and some lore and the traditional kind of symbolism surrounding the cacao tree. So I guess I'm going to say cacao again. It actually has a really cool, rich history in Mesoamerica. It's pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, right? So in Maya and Aztec civilizations in the pre-Columbian Mesoamerican time frame, so a very, very, very long time ago, the cacao tree was actually highly revered for it was kind of like the phoenix, right? Because it was symbolic of death, and they would use it in a lot of death rituals. But in those cultures, death was the starting point for life. Like death spurned new life, and so regrow from the ashes. And so too, the cacao tree was also seen as a symbol of life, and so it was also used in life-giving ceremonies and weddings and births and all of the things. I mean, so important was the cacao tree to the Aztecs that it was actually on like their calendar as one of the sort of four corners, the four directionals. And I'll put a picture up. Super gorgeous, super amazing, highly revered. They also used it for currency. They would use it like money. And so that's really cool. And I did actually find a lot of this information on a WordPress thing for a chocolate thing, but it has a really great bibliography. So I'll link that all below as far as the traditional stuff in, the Mesoamerican history part. But yeah, it's been around for a very long time. It's highly revered, much like all of these plants and things that we've been talking about, right? And that's cool. It's I find it to be actually very, very cool that there was a time period when like humans cared about the things around them and thought them to be valuable and worth a lot. And I think in a 21st century perspective, we totally just have this mindset of, I don't know, we take things for granted, and there are all of these cultures and like proof of all of these cultures super not taking something as commonplace as, oh, there's a tree. I have so many trees in my backyard. I'm not revering any of them. I wonder if people have ever revered maple trees. But I do find it cool that we have all of these civilizations out there that, see the value and the worth in this thing so much so that it becomes part of their freaking calendar. That's amazing. And then we get to look back on it and go, wow, like you people had a harder life than we people do, but you seem to be doing some things right. Yay, Earth, and all of the things. Anyway, now that we have talked about the origin, the symbolism, the production, the location, all of the jazz, let's get on to, I don't know what we're doing next. We're going to either do how it's used in soap or the controversies. Kind of want to end on a nice note with how it's used in soap and just kick off the controversies now and get it out of the way. So I guess let's do that next. Okay, so you remember earlier how I said that chocolate is a daily part of my life? That is a literal fact. I'm not being dramatic by saying that. It really is. And me and about, 3 billion other people on the planet, I don't even need to pull up statistics and give you stats about how much chocolate is consumed, produced, distributed, sold annually for you to know that it's a crap ton. And as we have talked about with all of these deep dives, when something can be exploited, people are going to exploit it. And this is a really obviously easy one to exploit, right? Because the demand is high. It's huge. And cocoa trees, as we discussed, they don't produce a lot. They have a relatively small yield per tree, and the crops have to be grown in relatively small plots in order to ensure they survive and they don't get destroyed by, fungus. And so this controversy is probably one of the worst. And this sucks because it's like 12 hours too early to start drinking. I feel like that might make this a lot easier. But, seriously, this is a serious subject and it's not fun. So the controversy surrounding cocoa butter, cocoa, chocolate in general, and again, cocoa butter does get lumped into chocolate because they are both produced, grown, harvested, cultivated, distributed at the same time. Cocoa butter is wildly more important in the food industry than it is in the cosmetic industry, although we do understand its importance within our industry too. The biggest problem and the controversy, and I wouldn't even call it a controversy, it's just a problem, is the human rights violations that occur. And this one's deep, and it's actually a multi-pronged problem because there's not a really good, quick, simple answer. I mean, there isn't to any of the effects of a cause, but this one is really big because when we're talking about the exploitation of humans, of children, obviously just listening to that right off the bat, the outrage center of us comes out and, well, stop that. Bad farmers, why are you doing that? Well, the average salary for a cocoa farmer is less than $1 a day, which falls well below the extreme poverty line by any measure in any country's estimate. And that's huge. And so if the cocoa farmer is not making anything and the demand is super high, the yield is kind of low, and the demand is not only high, but people want it, they want a lot of it, and they want it all for cheap. And that's also coupled with the fact that these people in these areas wherein cocoa is being farmed and harvested and produced are living in extreme conditions. I mean, the majority of them don't have running water, bathrooms. Like these are just things that we take for granted. Like, yeah, no, that should always be accessible. I look at that as, an American citizen and go, that's a human rights thing. Like, we have a right to running water. These people don't, and they don't have access to anything. And so, okay. So you guys have an idea of what I'm even talking about. The biggest problem within the cocoa industry is, again, their human rights violations, and we are talking about slavery and child labor. And slavery as defined by, what? Because that could mean a number of things, right? Who are you talking to? It's the basic human rights violations that we know slavery to be. And so, forcing someone to work for no pay or very little pay, abuse conditions, not being allowed to leave, not being allowed to see their family, the general definitions of that term. And child labor laws, what does that mean? Or child labor. Really, they found that damn near every one of these farmers were violating child labor laws in some way. International labor laws from the ILO, the International Labor Organization, part of the UN. All this shit's going to be linked below, okay? It basically means that most of the children that work on these cocoa plants, cocoa farms, are between the ages of 12 and 16. But there are some instances of kids very young, very, very young. They're supposed to be in school. That was something that recently actually did get passed on the Ivory Coast, that it's a requirement that children go to school until the age of 16. It's not being followed. And these are all recent developments that these new accords are being put into place. But during these working conditions, kids are working like up to 14 hours a day. They don't get any breaks. They get very little pay, if any pay at all. There is actual trafficking going on, like kids being sold for like $34. And when they are working, they're young children using like chainsaws to go cut down trees that need to be removed, or climbing up these trees with a machete in hand to get down the pods. Dangerous working conditions, working alongside pesticides and chemicals without the appropriate gear and equipment. And it's bad. Now, this is primarily happening in West African countries, but there are a lot of instances of it happening in Brazil as well. Brazil makes up a fraction. I mean, not a fraction. Brazil makes up about 3% of the world's, cocoa supply, but it happens there too, much the same thing. And you remember earlier when I said I had a difficult time even determining what a pound of, chocolate meant, a pound produced per tree, right? What that even meant, what they were defining chocolate as. One of the reasons for that is it's a very secretive industry and it becomes more and more secretive. Going back to the Willy Wonka thing and protecting the secrets of chocolate, sure, but that's really for the actual chocolatiers and the people that are making the chocolate, not so much the people that are farming. So why are the cocoa farmers being so secretive? This is why. This is why. And there were reports of like journalists trying to go undercover and being killed. And just trying to get behind the curtain and see what's really going on in this industry. From what they have gathered, it's bad. And it's, again, not a controversy. It's just a problem. This is something that is one of those big brain moments and those big conversations that I'm certainly not equipped to fix. I can't resolve this. And it's just bad. And, I'm sorry for getting down a reality rabbit hole, I guess. Obviously, you guys know me and I like to keep everything upbeat and positive and whatever. Kind of even when we're talking about controversies, because controversies are usually never as dark as this. But this is something that has to be talked about. Mr. Soap and Clay came in and saw me, kind of doing my little, I don't want to do this. And he's like, well, why are you? You have to. You can't. When we take something and we use something for our craft and our use of that, our demand, is contributing to something as deplorable as this, or to anything, it's nice to be aware and to be informed. And so it has to be talked about. I can't gloss over this. This is something that cannot be sped past. So it's bad. And I will link some articles and some information from the UN, from the ILO, from UNICEF. I mean, it's known and they're working on it, but it's bad. So speaking of working on it, what can be done? Well, as we've talked about before on the channel, boycotts don't work. We are in a very small part of the cocoa butter need, the cocoa need, the whatever need as soap makers. And you can easily remove cocoa butter from all of your formulations. You really can. And if you feel that that's what you should do, then you should do it. That doesn't really make an impact, though. As we've talked about before, boycotts don't tend to work. It doesn't actually change the behavior. The way to fix this is through governance. And being aware is the first step in ensuring that the governance is, done. So with all of that, dark and gloomy, we do have some good news that has come out just as recently as this last year. In last October of 2020, the universal ratification of the Convention of the Worst Forms of Child Labor was signed by a crap ton of countries in Africa, as well as, tons of other countries, because it's the International Labor Organization. And this was all done through the UN, and it's a step in the right direction. This was ratified in Africa in big, big ways. And so that's a big, big deal for sure. COVID has made it difficult to start tracking this and ensuring that these measures are being taken and to help people sort of out within these situations that they're in order to, get them a sustainable, livable working environment. Children specifically is what this one is about, but realistically, the hope is all end up being helped through something like this. COVID has made it difficult for them to do that, to really ramp this up, and I get that. So this is something to keep an eye on. And I will link the actual, ratification and all of the information within this below. If you would like to read the entire thing, that would be great. But the big takeaways are the biggest producers of, cocoa are in Africa. The biggest countries are on board and have signed this and are eager to really start rolling everything out, which is good. It is definitely a step in the right direction. To date, 72 million children are still dealing with really horrible labor conditions, and something like 30 million of them, at least, are in dangerous working conditions. So that's rough. And as I said, this is a multi-pronged, thing here, because yes, it's horrific. And I can look at this from an American perspective and say, oh, God, horrific. How dare you? Whatever. Fix it. Fix it. For those people that aren't enslaved by like an actual person and being like literally forced to work against their will by an actual person, their conditions of living are still enslaving them and forcing them to go and work hard, long hours at dangerous jobs in horrible conditions for a next to nothing pay, because next to nothing is better than nothing. And so this is a problem that is, again, it has a lot of moving parts. And the thing that we can do as, humans breathing in and out right now is be aware of it and follow the information that's coming out and see the steps that, the UN or all of the different countries within Africa and their coalitions are taking. Be aware of it. As an American citizen, I can do exactly nothing for any of that. I can't do anything other than be aware and contribute and donate, right? Because it's not my jurisdiction. These are not my countries. I don't live in any of these countries, and they have to govern themselves. But I think what the ILO is doing, and that these countries are willing to, sign this and start working towards better labor environments, just better environments, especially for children, is a big step in the right direction. Another thing to keep in mind and to check out is the worldcocoafoundation.org. The World Cocoa Foundation is very much concerned with helping and getting grants and getting funding for these farmers, for these places that are, again, responsible for 70% of the world's chocolate. You can't just stop that, right? But we should give them living wages and good working conditions and a way to thrive and not just survive. And so the World Cocoa Foundation is focused on that and getting more awareness and helping out with getting better living conditions and more sanitary conditions, and again, more grants and fundings to help out these farmers to get them on track to have a sustainable life that does not require the mistreatment of other humans in these horrible, human rights violations. So definitely pay attention to them. Go to their website, check out what they're doing for the cause. Also, it is important to note, because we are talking, again, basically food with all of this, the big players in the chocolate industry have signed up with the World Cocoa Foundation. They're also on board with this new thing from the ILO to ensure that the chocolate that they're getting is cruelty-free, responsibly sourced, and going through these programs to ensure that nobody's being exploited. And so, I'm talking about all of the big players in chocolate. We're talking about Ferrero, Godiva, Ghirardelli, General Mills, Hershey, Mondelez, Nestle, Ovaltine, Palmer's, Purdy's, Starbucks, See's Candy, Seattle Chocolates, Whitaker's. They're all there. And so I guess us as consumers, if our prices go up as a result, be okay with that. Because I would rather pay more for chocolate than know that it's coming from a really ill-gotten place, So that's the controversy. And I'm going to take a quick break because I'm getting all weird and weepy again. So I'm going to be right back. For you, it's just another title screen, and we'll go talk about its uses in soap. But I'm going to go try to make myself upbeat. Okay, back. My mom actually called right after I turned the camera off to, compose myself or whatever. She's not crazy. It's like 8 a.m. at this point, so she's not like calling me at 6:30 in the morning. It's 8. I've been filming for a while, and she wanted to talk to me about the trip that we're taking the whole family on for a big Colorado, ski trip or whatever. And she was able to calm me down and put me in a different headspace to allow me to come back and finish this video. So thank you, mon mère. You are amazing. She never watches my videos. Props to mom in the comments. Yes. So on to cocoa butter and how we use it in soap. Well, first up, how we get it to be used in soap is probably where we should start. And typically we get 2 different options, right? Deodorized or not deodorized. And the deodorized is going to be a cocoa butter that has been chemically and physically altered, usually using chemicals or another high heat steam method to really remove the smell. It's really what you're doing. Also, within that process, because of that process, it becomes lighter in color. There is a bleaching component going on there. The non-deodorized cocoa butter is going to smell like chocolate. And so it's going to be darker in color, and it's going to have that really strong chocolate smell. As far as which to choose for your products, well, the deodorized is primarily what's used in most cosmetics, in most, retail grade cosmetics, stuff like that, just because they do, in fact, want to remove the smell of the chocolate. And so if you are doing something really light in scent, like the florals, really bright and light notes, using a deodorized cocoa butter is probably your best bet, because that chocolate is going to overpower all of those notes for sure. For those that are if you're using a scent that's more earthy and grounded, think of it's deep, right? That would pair well with the chocolate scent, like your sandalwoods, your cedars, your patchoulis, etc., 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 then yeah, totally go with the non-deodorized version. And that chocolate smell is really just going to ground the scent and help it stick, and it's going to be delightful no matter what you put in it. Another thing to keep in mind with deodorized versus non-deodorized, because of the way that they actually deodorize the cocoa butter, it's actually killing off a lot of the skin-loving things like the antioxidants that we really, really love and want because of the method that they use. So if you're looking for actual skin-loving benefits, I would go with non-deodorized over deodorized. And also, it's a personal preference anyway, based on how you run your business and what you want to do. If you want a product that is as virgin as you can get, you should go with a non-deodorized. If you don't care and you don't want the smell of chocolate to be in everything that you do, go with the deodorized for sure. Now let's talk about what cocoa butter is comprised of as far as the fatty acids go. Well, we've got palmitic, stearic, and oleic. So the fatty acid profile of cocoa butter is 35% stearic, 35% oleic, and 25% palmitic, and then just trace amounts of a couple other fatty acids that we're not going to talk about, because the bulk is going to come from the stearic, the oleic, and the palmitic. Now, equal parts stearic and oleic, okay, 35% each. We know stearic to be a bar hardener. It produces a very creamy lather, can help stabilize lather for sure. Oleic, you would commonly find in olive oil, right? Very, very moisturizing, creamy lather too. And then the palmitic, also a bar hardener, can stabilize the lather as well. Also a creamy lather though. So as far as using it within a soap, you're going to be getting something much like a palm oil, 100% palm oil soap in that. It's going to be a very creamy lather, but because of the high amounts of oleic acid in a cocoa butter, you might run into the problem that you do with olive oil soaps, right? And that you might have a slimy lather. So tomorrow we will be doing a 100% cocoa butter soap recipe, and we will be testing it against the palm oil soap to see, kind of what it does and if the lather is, kind of similar. If you're looking for a soap that its lather is nice and creamy and very gentle and moisturizing and conditioning, a 100% cocoa butter soap would work, assuming that it doesn't have the sliminess that tends to come with olive oil soaps. So that'll be an interesting test for tomorrow. As far as cosmetics and how you use cocoa butter in cosmetics, well, I mean, the possibilities are endless. It's a great lip protectant because of its vitamin-rich nature, so it's great to put into lip balms. It's also a great skin protectant for the same reasons, so it's good to put into lotions and creams and salves and solid lotion bars. All of the jazz. The comedogenic rating on cocoa butter is what? The comedogenic rating of cocoa butter is 4, probably because it's very high in oleic and palmitic acid. And basically that means the molecules are packed pretty tight together. And so it will be more likely that your pores will clog. So to use as a face treatment, probably not. For hair masks, absolutely. Definitely do that thing. It will add structure to like an open shaft for sure and help condition that and seal it and protect it. And it'll provide great moisture for textured hair types. So definitely, yeah, totally. Would be good in a number of applications, which we already know. Cocoa butter is actually pretty extraordinary on its own, realistically, but on its own makes it hard, right? Because it is a solid butter that becomes fluid-ish when it comes in contact with the human body. Ish. You actually kind of have to work a lot. It's just like, M&Ms, melt in your mouth, not in your hand type thing. It's kind of like that. And so you would never want to use like a 100% cocoa butter, like you could do a 100% shea butter for a lotion or a body butter. Cocoa butter would be much harder to do because it will firm up into a very solid consistency. So you could actually pair that 50-50 blend. I always love 50-50 blends for body butters. You could do 50% cocoa butter and 50% insert any other oil that you love, as long as it's not too thick. An avocado oil would be tough. Any other lightweight oil, like an apricot or an argan, grapeseed. But realistically, just because of the higher cost of cocoa butter, I wouldn't ever put that into really any formulation above 20% for actual leave-on products and above 10% for soap, mostly because all of the properties that you're going to get from a cocoa butter in soap, you can easily get from a cheaper oil. So you could check that out for sure. I use cocoa butter reasonably frequently in my leave-on products. So my lotion bars and my lip balms and hair masks. Actually, we've never done hair masks on the channel. Maybe we should do that. And I like cocoa butter. I really do. I think it provides a really smooth texture to a body butter, to a leave-on product like a lotion or a body butter or a hair mask to that. And it doesn't weigh anything down if it's not used at too terribly high of an amount. Again, a body butter, a 50-50 blend with cocoa butter, which is pretty heavy, and a lightweight oil, great. That would be amazing. So, try that. Weird recipe day. Try it. Let me know how it goes. So yeah, as far as use in the soap world and the cosmetic world, yeah, I do. I mess with that. I mess with it quite a bit. And I don't mess with it in such high amounts that it stops making sense for my ROI. So definitely keep that in mind when formulating your recipes. So wrapping this up, what does it all mean? Cocoa butter, like everything else that we've been talking about, is old, is honored, is cherished, is revered, has a very long history, and has some problems associated with its production because consumerism. And also to that, I do find it interesting that this plant that was touted for being a big symbol of rebirth, like the phoenix, is currently something that like human rights violations are occurring over. And that's really sad and awful. And so we as soap makers, what do we do about that? We make our own decisions, as we do with everything in our lives. If you feel very strongly about this and you want to stop using cocoa butter, do so. There is no real reason that you need it in really any of your formulations. There are other butter options that would be really well suited and very similar to cocoa butter. Kokum butter comes to mind right away. It's a very expensive butter though. Mango butter, it's reasonably similar in leave-on applications. Sure. But again, it's not needed. It can be replaced. So if you would like to no longer use it, then do that. That's great. If that's what makes this all square in yourself, do that. We need to make sure first and foremost that we are square within ourselves about the things that we are doing. So yes, for those of you who want to continue using it, I recommend making sure that all of your cocoa butters are responsibly sourced. And any vendor that you go to should have that information. And if they don't, I'm not going to say it's probably not, but it might not be. So definitely pay attention to that. And again, also keep in mind that in the soap making industry and the cosmetic industry, we are just a drop in the bucket for actual cocoa butter use and consumption, because again, it is mainly used within the food industry. So a boycott might not necessarily help, but if it makes you feel better in your convictions, do that for sure. There's no requirement that says you have to use it. And again, as I said, easily subbed out. So there's that. For my part, I will continue using cocoa butter when necessary. The price point of it is already high, but I am willing to pay more if that means that there are better and more ethical working conditions for all of the peoples that are working very hard to get us the products that we need and want. So that would be fine too, especially in the amounts that I use it in within my soap making, which is just a bit. Use it a lot, but I use a little bit of it. So if that makes sense. So anyway, there was the last deep dive of the year of 2021. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. The soap chef will be doing a live on her channel tomorrow night at 5 p.m. PST for us left coasters. So I will be there. Mr. Soap and Clay will be there. We will be having a good time on the live. So you guys should pop over there and check out the live. And Mr. Soap and Clay and I will be going live on New Year's Day. So you'll be able to see just how wrecked we got following or during the Soap Chef's live on New Year's Eve. I hope all of you guys have a very, very wonderful New Year's Eve and you kick off 2022 in epic, excellent, awesome, healthy, beautiful, loving, kind ways. And you keep that energy throughout all 365 days of 2022. That would be excellent. That is my hope for each and every one of you for the new year. I am glad that you guys joined me for another round of 365 days of soap. I'm out of here right now. I have to go edit this video and upload this video and schedule the premiere, which I will be on with you talking about. And this video, probably as I edit it, it's going to be the weirdest 2.5 hours of my life because I started crying and then I cried again, but for 2 different reasons. It's going to be wild. And for my sudsers, I appreciate you guys so much. And you guys being okay with the wild. You guys are within me. You guys are such a part of my life and such a part of who I am like as a human. And I appreciate you every single day. And today, December 30th, no exception. No exception. But I am out of here because I got to go edit this thing. So I'll see you in a couple hours. You know, weird. You get it. But I will see you all again tomorrow for a video and another round of soapy fun. Bye.